The city lights flickered faintly as Evan walked along the path of the quiet park, the cool evening air brushing against his face. It was a typical night for him, one of those afterwork moments when the world seemed to slow down and thoughts wandered freely. He had just finished a long shift at the lab, and as usual, his mind was filled with equations, prototypes, and the endless mysteries of the universe. But on this particular evening, as he passed by the park's edge, something out of the ordinary caught his attention. A low, almost imperceptible hum drifted through the air, making the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. It wasn't the sound of nature, no rustling leaves or the distant chirping of birds. This was something different, something metallic. Intrigued, Evan's curiosity got the better of him, and he ventured deeper into the park, following the mysterious hum. As he rounded a bend near a secluded part of the park, he saw her. A figure stood by one of the large, overgrown bushes, her silhouette outlined by the faint glow of the streetlights in the distance. She was unlike anyone Evan had ever seen. Her skin was a shimmering silver, like polished metal, catching the dim light in an almost ethereal way. Her hair, if it could even be called that, flowed in waves of an iridescent color that seemed to shift in the dim light. It wasn't quite blue, nor was it green. It was something in between, a glowing hue that made her appear almost otherworldly. Her eyes, too, were captivating. They were large, bright violet orbs that glowed softly, and as Evan locked eyes with her, he felt a strange connection, as though she could see right through him. She wore a suit that seemed to shimmer and change with every slight movement, as if it adapted to her every motion. The texture of the fabric was unlike anything Evan had ever encountered, a smooth, metallic surface that reflected light like liquid mercury. For a moment, Evan stood frozen, unsure of what to do. This wasn't a human being. It wasn't even something that could be classified in any conventional sense. He should have been afraid, but instead, he felt a strange calmness wash over him. There was something about her, something that made him feel both excited and, oddly enough, safe. She took a few steps forward, her movements graceful and deliberate. Her gaze never wavered from Evan, and though she didn't speak, there was a clear sense of urgency in her posture. She seemed to be trying to convey something without words. The hum that had drawn him here seemed to come from her, a faint vibration that he could feel deep within his chest, like the pulse of a living thing. "Are you all right?" Evan asked, his voice breaking the silence. It was the first thing that came to mind, though he wasn't sure why he said it. After all, how do you even begin to speak to something like this? A being from another world. The alien woman tilted her head slightly, her violet eyes reflecting a deep sense of confusion. She raised one of her hands, extending her long, slender fingers towards Evan, as if to touch him. There was no hostility in her gesture, just a silent request. She was asking for something, but what? Evan's mind raced as he tried to process the situation. Could she understand him? Was this some kind of elaborate hoax? He felt his pulse quicken, and for a split second he wondered if he should run. But his curiosity outweighed his fear. Something told him that running would be the biggest mistake of his life. He stepped closer, keeping his distance just in case. "Can I help you with something?" The woman's gaze shifted down to her wrist, where a small, metallic device was embedded into her suit. It looked out of place against the otherwise sleek design, almost like a watch, but far more intricate, with glowing symbols and lights that seemed to pulse with life. She gestured to it, her eyes meeting his again, and it was then that he realized she was trying to communicate. Evan knelt down to get a better look at the device. It was unlike any technology he'd ever seen. It didn't resemble anything from Earth. There were no buttons or visible controls, only a smooth, seamless surface with faint markings that shifted across its face. "Is this broken?" Evan asked, his voice quieter now, unsure of how to proceed. The woman nodded once, her gaze focused on him. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. It was as if she was trying to speak but couldn't form the words. She tapped the device lightly, then looked back at Evan, clearly frustrated. Evan's mind raced as he examined the device. He wasn't an expert in alien technology, but as a scientist, he was well versed in troubleshooting gadgets. It was possible that the device's functions could be similar to Earth's technology in some way. The thought crossed his mind, maybe he could help. "Let me take a look," he said, reaching out cautiously. The woman didn't pull away, and with her silent permission, Evan gently touched the device. As soon as his fingers made contact, the symbols on the device shifted, and the faint hum that had been emanating from her increased in pitch. He could feel a small pulse of energy travel through the device, then a small flicker of light in the corner of his eye. The screen on the device flickered once, then stabilized. Evan let out a quiet sigh of relief. "There, I think I've fixed it," he said, looking up at her. The woman's eyes widened as she examined the device, her face softening with what Evan interpreted as gratitude. She nodded slowly, then with a fluid motion, reached out and placed her hand on his. The touch was warm, almost electrifying, as though her presence sent a current of energy through him. Evan's heart skipped a beat, but before he could process the feeling, she stepped back, looking at him intently. A soft, melodic sound escaped her lips, a hum, low and gentle. Evan wasn't sure if it was a thank you or something else, but it felt significant. There was a warmth in the sound, a sense of connection that transcended words. The alien woman then raised her wrist, activating the device once again. She pressed a button on its surface, and a holographic image appeared in front of her, a map, maybe, or some sort of data. Evan watched, his curiosity growing by the second. The map shimmered in midair, showing distant stars and planets, but one symbol stood out, a glowing point on a distant world. The woman's eyes locked onto the image, and she motioned to Evan, pointing at the symbol. For a brief moment, Evan wondered what he was getting himself into. This could be the greatest scientific discovery of all time, or it could be the start of something far more dangerous. But as the alien woman silently watched him, waiting for a response, he knew one thing for sure: he couldn't just walk away from this. What is this?" Evan asked, his voice trembling slightly. He didn't understand the language of the stars, but he knew this woman needed his help. He could feel it deep in his bones. She met his gaze, then pointed to the symbol once more. Slowly, she nodded. With that, the alien woman turned, taking a few steps away from him, then paused. She looked back over her shoulder at Evan, and for the briefest moment, there was something almost human in her expression, something that made Evan's heart race. He wasn't sure what had just happened, but he knew this wasn't the end of their encounter. It was only the beginning. As the woman disappeared into the shadows of the park, Evan stood still for a long moment, his mind racing. What had just happened? And what was that map? Where was she from, and why had she come to him? His thoughts were interrupted by the soft glow of the device still in his hand. It pulsed faintly in his palm, as if it were calling him to follow. And though the park was dark and quiet, Evan felt an overwhelming sense of certainty. He had to know more. He had to find out what came next. It had been 3 days since Evan's strange encounter with the alien woman. Despite his initial disbelief, the experience lingered in his thoughts, haunting him even as he tried to go about his usual routine. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shimmering silver skin, the glowing violet eyes, and the map that Lyra had shown him. It was as if she had left an imprint on his soul, a calling he couldn't ignore. His mind was racing. The night they met, everything had been so confusing, so surreal. How could this be real? Could there really be an alien world out there waiting for him to help save it? Evan had been skeptical at first. After all, who wouldn't be? He was a scientist, grounded in logic and reason. But the evidence was undeniable. He could still feel the warmth of Lyra's touch, the hum of the device she had given him to repair. And there was that map, showing a distant planet, one with a glowing symbol. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had become a part of something much larger than himself. As the days passed, Evan spent every free moment he had researching, digging into every piece of information he could find about extraterrestrial life, alien technology, and even intergalactic war. There was nothing that could truly prepare him for what was to come, but he had to be ready. Then, on the 4th evening after their meeting, the doorbell rang. It was late, past midnight, and Evan wasn't expecting anyone. He hesitated before getting up to answer, his heart thumping in his chest. When he opened the door, there she was. Lyra stood in front of him, her silvery skin glowing softly in the dim light of the hallway. She wore the same sleek suit as before, the one that shimmered in the low light, but this time there was something different in her demeanor. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood a group of figures, tall and imposing. They were dressed in heavy, dark armor, their faces obscured by helmets. They looked like soldiers, alien soldiers, perhaps. Their presence was unsettling, but it was Lyra's calm, almost pleading expression that drew Evan's attention. "Lyra," Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He had no idea how to respond to the situation. What was happening? Why was she here, and why had she brought others with her? Lyra didn't speak at first. Instead, she stepped forward, holding out her hand. Evan could see the same device on her wrist, still glowing faintly. She motioned for him to follow her, and despite his confusion, Evan nodded. There was something in her eyes, something that told him he couldn't turn back now. The soldiers didn't move as Evan stepped outside and closed the door behind him. Lyra led him down the street in silence, the cool night air wrapping around them. The others followed at a distance, watching silently. Evan couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that every move he made was being analyzed. As they walked, Lyra finally spoke. Her voice was soft, musical, and yet there was a sense of urgency behind it. "I'm sorry to bring you into this, Evan," she began. "But I need your help. Our people are in grave danger. The planet you saw on the device, it's where I come from, it's where my world lies." Evan's heart skipped a beat. The distant planet she had shown him, the map, the glowing symbol. Everything was falling into place, but the weight of her words felt like a punch to the gut. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra stopped and turned to face him, her violet eyes locking with his. "You have skills that can help us. The device I gave you, it's more than just a simple communication tool. It's a key, Evan, a key to something much bigger." Evan's mind was spinning. What was she talking about? A key? To what? She continued, her voice filled with emotion. "The war between my people and the others, the ones who attacked us, it's been going on for centuries. But the technology you can help us unlock could turn the tide. It could save my world." There was a pause. Lyra looked down, almost as if she were gathering strength. When she looked back at Evan, her face was filled with determination. "I can't do this alone, but I believe that you, Evan, have the power to make a difference." The weight of her words hit Evan hard. He had no idea what he was being asked to do, but he could see the fear in her eyes. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense of a looming disaster. He wasn't sure he was ready for this, but there was no turning back. Lyra needed him, and in that moment, he knew he couldn't let her down. The group of soldiers around them remained silent, but their presence made it clear that this wasn't just about repairing a broken device. This was about something much larger, something that involved the survival of an entire alien race. "I'll help," Evan said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling inside him. "But you have to tell me everything. What's going on? Who are these enemies? And what is this weapon you keep talking about?" Lyra nodded, and together they walked to a nearby park bench where she motioned for him to sit. She took a deep breath before speaking again. "The enemy is a race of beings known as the Atrakan. They've been at war with my people for generations. They're ruthless, technologically advanced, and they won't stop until they've wiped us out completely." She paused, her eyes filled with sorrow. "They've already attacked my home. And if we don't act soon, they'll destroy everything." Evan listened intently, his mind absorbing every word. The situation sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, but he knew this wasn't fiction. This was real. The stakes were higher than anything he had ever imagined. Lyra's voice dropped to a whisper. "The device you fixed. It's part of an ancient weapon, a weapon capable of destroying entire fleets, but it's not fully activated. It needs someone with human ingenuity to unlock its full potential." She looked at him, her eyes pleading. "That's why I came to you. You're the only one who can help." Evan felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. It was a lot to take in, but somehow he knew she was telling the truth. The device, the map, the soldiers, it all pointed to something much bigger, something that could change the course of the war. And if he could help, if he could be the one to turn the tide in their favor, then maybe, just maybe, he could make a difference. He nodded slowly, his resolve strengthening. "I'll help. Just tell me what to do." Lyra smiled, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Evan. You don't know how much this means to me." As they sat there in the quiet park, Evan felt a sense of purpose settle over him. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew that his life was about to change forever. He had been thrust into a battle for survival, not just for humanity, but for an entire alien race. And somehow, he had become the key to saving it all. The soldiers gathered around them, their presence a silent reminder of the gravity of the situation. The journey ahead would be dangerous, filled with challenges and uncertainties, but Evan had made his choice. He was in this no matter what. The next few days felt like a blur to Evan. Every waking moment seemed to be consumed by the alien woman, Lyra, and the strange, powerful mission she had thrust him into. He had always thought of himself as a scientist, someone who was more at home in a laboratory than in the midst of an intergalactic conflict. But now, here he was, standing on the edge of something much larger than himself. The fate of a whole alien world seemed to rest on his shoulders, and with every passing hour, the weight of that responsibility grew heavier. Lyra had taken him to a secret facility, hidden deep beneath the earth, far away from the prying eyes of the public. It was a place that looked more like a high-tech military base than a research facility, and Evan quickly learned that it was. The soldiers who had accompanied her were part of an elite unit, tasked with guarding the remaining pieces of the ancient weapon that Lyra had spoken about. The weapon was a relic from a long-lost civilization, one far more advanced than anything Earth had ever known. Inside the facility, Lyra explained more about the weapon. It was called the Vanguard, and it was capable of destroying entire fleets, perhaps even entire planets. The power it held was unimaginable, but it had been dormant for centuries. The Atrakan, the enemy race that was waging war against Lyra's people, had discovered the weapon's existence, and they were hell-bent on activating it for their own use. But the weapon could not be activated without a special key, one that had been lost over time. Lyra believed that the device Evan had repaired was a crucial part of this key. She also believed that his unique understanding of technology, particularly human technology, was what would unlock its full potential. As the days passed, Evan found himself immersed in a world of alien technology, ancient ruins, and long-forgotten history. He worked alongside Lyra and the soldiers, piecing together the clues that would lead them to the next step in activating the Vanguard. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't without danger. The Atrakan were closing in, and their forces were vast. But Evan pushed forward, knowing that he had no choice. If he didn't help, Lyra's people, and perhaps all of humanity, would fall. One night, after a long day of studying the weapon's components, Evan sat alone in his small quarters within the facility. He couldn't sleep. His mind was too busy, racing with questions. He had already helped Lyra with one piece of the puzzle, but there were so many more. What else did the weapon do? What were the true consequences of unleashing its power? And most importantly, could they really stop the Atrakan? A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Lyra. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. Evan nodded, standing up from the chair where he had been sitting. He followed her down the narrow hallway, past several security checkpoints, until they reached a small, quiet room at the end of the corridor. The room was empty, save for a table and 2 chairs. "Sit," Lyra said, gesturing to one of the chairs. She sat down across from him, her expression serious. Evan sat, his heart pounding in his chest. There was something different in her eyes tonight, something more intense. He could feel the weight of the conversation that was about to unfold. "Everything has changed, hasn't it?" Lyra said quietly, her violet eyes searching his face. "When I first came to you, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if you would help me, or if you even could. But now, I see how much you've become a part of this. You've helped us unlock part of the weapon. You've done more than I ever thought possible." Evan looked at her, confused. "But you still haven't told me everything. There's so much more to this. The Vanguard, the Atrakan. Why is this weapon so dangerous? What exactly does it do?" Lyra looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edges of the device on her wrist. For a long moment, she didn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was soft, almost like she was revealing something deeply personal. "The Vanguard was created by an ancient civilization," she began, her voice distant. "A civilization that no longer exists. They were peaceful, but their technology was beyond anything we could imagine. The Vanguard was meant to be a protector, a safeguard against those who would threaten the peace of the galaxy. But over time, it was lost. And when the Atrakan discovered it, they saw its power as a weapon, something they could use to conquer, to dominate." Evan leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "So the Vanguard was never meant to be a weapon? It was meant to protect?" "Yes," Lyra replied, her eyes meeting his. "But in the wrong hands, it could destroy everything. That's why it's so dangerous. It has the power to wipe out entire fleets, entire worlds, and once it's activated, there's no turning back. If we don't stop the Atrakan from getting it, they will use it to obliterate us, my people, your world, everything." Evan felt a chill run down his spine. The implications of what she was saying were too big to comprehend fully. He had always thought of space as a distant, unreachable frontier, but now it felt like a battleground. His thoughts raced, trying to process everything she had just told him. "How do we stop them?" Evan asked, his voice steady despite the fear growing inside him. Lyra's expression hardened. We need to activate the Vanguard before they do. We need to beat them to it before it's too late. But to do that, we need one final piece, a key that's been hidden for centuries. And that's where you come in, Evan. You're the key to unlocking its power. Evan stared at her, still not fully understanding. Me, I don't understand. How am I the key? Lyra leaned in, her face inches from his. The weapon requires human ingenuity to function. Your mind, your creativity, your ability to think outside the box is what makes it possible to unlock its full potential. Without you, we can't activate it. We can't stop the A-Tracken. A silence settled between them, thick with tension. Evan could feel the weight of her words, the pressure of the task ahead. The fate of two worlds was on the line, and the responsibility had been placed squarely in his hands. He could no longer deny the gravity of the situation. I'll do it, he said, his voice firm. Lyra smiled, relief washing over her face. Thank you, Evan. You don't know how much this means to me. He nodded, but the doubt still lingered in the back of his mind. There was so much about the Vanguard that he didn't understand. What kind of power could it truly unleash? Was it worth the risk? And if they succeeded, would it truly bring peace, or would it just create another cycle of violence? Lyra seemed to sense his hesitation. I know this is overwhelming. It's not easy, but you've already done so much. We're getting closer. Just a little more time and we'll have the Vanguard fully activated. We'll be able to fight back. Evan's mind was still racing. He had to keep pushing forward, but he couldn't ignore the nagging doubts. What was the cost of all this? What would the world look like if they succeeded? As the night wore on, Evan couldn't shake the feeling that the true test was still ahead. He had become a part of something much larger than himself, but now he had to decide. Was he ready to face the consequences, whatever they might be? The days blurred together as Evan worked alongside Lyra and her team. Every moment felt like a countdown, a race against time. The A-Tracken were getting closer, their forces gathering for a final assault, and Evan knew they had little time to finish what they had started. He had become immersed in the mission, learning more about the Vanguard and its incredible power with each passing day. But with each new discovery came a growing sense of unease. He knew that this weapon, this ancient force that Lyra's people had uncovered, could change everything, but at what cost? Evan had always believed in the power of science, in the idea that knowledge could lead to progress. But now, as he worked on unlocking the Vanguard's full potential, he was starting to question whether some knowledge was too dangerous to wield. Lyra was different now. The calm and composed woman Evan had met just days ago had changed. Her urgency had grown, her eyes filled with a determination that bordered on desperation. Evan could see the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She had entrusted him with the key to their survival, and he couldn't let her down. He couldn't let anyone down. Yet, as he sat in the small laboratory, analyzing the data on the Vanguard, Evan couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing with fire. The weapon had the power to destroy fleets, to wipe out entire worlds. He had learned enough by now to know that the Vanguard's energy source was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. It was a force that could bend space itself, a technology that was far beyond anything Evan had ever encountered. But with great power came great danger. The A-Tracken were relentless, and if they reached the Vanguard before Lyra and her team, the galaxy could be lost. There was no turning back once it was activated, and the question that haunted Evan was whether it was truly worth the risk. That night, as he sat alone in his quarters, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy projected before him, he heard a soft knock on the door. It was Lyra. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of exhaustion and urgency. Evan stood and opened the door. He hadn't seen her much over the past few hours. The weight of their mission had pulled her in different directions, and they had both been working separately to prepare for the final phase of the Vanguard's activation. But now, in the quiet of the night, it felt like the calm before the storm. "I've been thinking," Lyra began, her violet eyes meeting his. "We're close, so close, but there's still one last step, one last piece of the puzzle, and I need your help, Evan." Evan nodded, but a sense of unease lingered in his chest. "What's the last piece?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, then sat down across from him. "The Vanguard needs a final activation code. It's a sequence, a pattern of energy frequencies that only a human mind can decode. The code was designed by the ancient civilization who created the weapon. They knew that only a race with the creativity and adaptability of humans could unlock it. That's why I came to you. Evan frowned. So you need me to decode the activation code? But how? I don't even know what it looks like. Lyra's expression softened, and she took a deep breath. The code is embedded in the Vanguard's core in a series of energy fields. It's not something you can see with your eyes, it's something you feel. The frequencies are like a puzzle, a pattern that needs to be unlocked. And only a human brain can do it. Evan thought for a moment. The idea seemed absurd. How could a human mind decode something so complex, so foreign? But then again, he had already been involved in solving pieces of this puzzle. The device Lyra had shown him, the map, the weapon, it all felt like one grand, interconnected mystery. And now it seemed that the final piece was within his reach. "I'll do it," Evan said, his voice steady, though doubt still gnawed at him. He had come this far, and there was no turning back now. Lyra smiled, a look of relief washing over her face. "Thank you, Evan. I knew I could count on you." They spent the next few hours preparing for the final phase. Lyra and her soldiers made their way to the Vanguard's core, deep inside the facility. The area was heavily guarded, with security systems that could neutralize any threat. Evan, however, was granted access to the most secure part of the base. It was here that the weapon's true power lay hidden. The room was cold and sterile, filled with advanced alien technology that hummed with energy. At the center of the room stood the Vanguard, a massive spherical structure encased in a shimmering, transparent dome. It glowed with an otherworldly light, pulsing in rhythm with Evan's heartbeat. As they approached the Vanguard, Evan felt a wave of apprehension wash over him. This was it, the moment when everything could change. The weapon was finally within their reach, but so was the possibility of catastrophic failure. "Are you ready?" Lyra asked, her voice steady but tinged with concern. Evan nodded. "Let's do it." They moved to the control console, a series of intricate panels that flickered with holographic data. Evan placed his hands on the surface, and as his fingers made contact, the panels lit up. The Vanguard's core responded, a soft hum filling the room as the energy fields activated. Evan's mind began to focus, the patterns of energy swirling around him. It was like a symphony of frequencies, each one more complex than the last. He closed his eyes, blocking out everything except the patterns of energy. It was a sensation unlike anything he had ever felt, a mixture of logic and intuition, science and creativity. The code was there, embedded in the fields. It was like finding the key to a lock that had never been touched before. With a final burst of concentration, Evan's mind unlocked the sequence. The Vanguard's core activated, and the room trembled as the weapon hummed to life. The energy fields surrounding the core shifted, and for a moment everything seemed to glow with an intense, blinding light. Evan stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. He had done it. He had activated the Vanguard. Lyra stood beside him, her expression unreadable. The soldiers behind them watched in awe as the weapon powered up, the light growing brighter and brighter. But Evan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Vanguard was alive now. It was more than just a weapon. It was a force, a power that could reshape the galaxy. And with that power came a responsibility that Evan wasn't sure he was ready to bear. "We've done it," Lyra said, her voice filled with awe. "Now the final step. We can stop the Atrakan before they reach us." But as Evan looked at the glowing core, he couldn't help but wonder, what if activating the Vanguard wasn't the solution? What if it only brought more destruction, more violence? The weapon was in his hands now, and Evan had to make a choice. Use its power to destroy the Atrakan, or find another way, a way that didn't involve the cost of so many lives. As the light from the Vanguard bathed them in its glow, Evan's thoughts raced. The stakes were higher than ever before, and the choice before him was one that would define the future.